Okay, Jane, if you will introduce yourself.
All right. Welcome, everyone. I am Jayne Huhtanen, Focal Point Coaching. I am a business and executive coach, and I help my clients with all of the things we're going to be talking about over the next 10 months, I suppose it is. Pete.
All righty. Pete Needham, Vice President, People and Culture at Next Dimension Fiji branch, currently on top secret assignment in Nice in the south of France, but will be returning in October. And I don't know whether my background will be Nice or Fiji at that point.
Wonderful.
You can keep us guessing, Pete. All right. So I will share my screen so that you can see the lovely slides that Pete and I pulled together. What we want to take you through today is the program launch, where we'll take you through kind of what will be happening and explain some of the logistics, because this program is going to be a bit different from some of the other peer groups that all of you join. And you'll see program launch season 1. We're hoping that this will have such high demand that you'll be begging for more, and we will have a season 2 next year. Today we've done a bit of introductions. I'm going to take you through some assumptions and explain how the calendar works to whet your appetite so that you want to come to every session. Pete is going to talk about the brain. Those of you who know Pete know that he likes to have fun. So he's going to throw in a bit of fun today, talk about the brain versus the mind. There will be time for Q&A and discussion at the end, and then we'll highlight what will be next, the next session. So this program, the next, from now till June, we really want to delve into why do we say and do what we do, understanding why do our colleagues, why do other people say and do what they do, and really give you understanding of what's going on in your brain to make that happen, other people's brains, and then what do you do about it in a work environment. So some theory, not too heavy theory, but also a lot of practical stuff coming out of that. So some of the assumptions that Pete and I have brought into this session, and that we want to make sure everyone's on the same page, is the quality of your life. So whether you are happy or unhappy will depend heavily on the kinds of relationships you have, both at work and outside of work. If you don't get along with the people you're working with, you're not going to be having a good time at work, even if you're enjoying the actual tasks that you do. To build those good relationships, which impact the quality of your life, you need to understand other people. And it's not always necessary to agree with people. As long as if you can find a way to understand them, where they're coming from, and what's going on, then even if there is disagreement, you can move in a more positive direction. Of course, to understand other people, you need to understand yourself first. And so that's one of the things we'll be talking about today. As we work through this, we are encouraging everyone to think and work and put their mind to work, put their brain to work, and really relate the concepts to themselves, to their situation, to other things happening around them, to other people, so that, thinking about why are people saying and doing why are things happening, and how can I make relationships better? How can I make my work better? How can I make life better for myself and for others by applying the concepts? And so the two pieces are, there's a bit of a play on words here. Your mind at work. So when your mind is working, how does it work? What's going on under the hood? And those are Pete's sessions. And then your mind at work, when it is at work, doing the work in the work environment, whether that's in your home office or a workplace office. And, so really getting into what Pete talks about, what Pete talks about, I'll be talking about what does that mean when you are actually working. So this should be interesting to you, and thank you everyone for showing up. And of course, as you need to drop off. So this is a high level description of what the program will be from now till June. I'm going to spend one or two sentences on each of these just to give you a framework for what will be happening, and then Pete will be jumping into the meat of today's session. As Kelly said, we're running 2 sessions each month. So generally, On Thursdays, it's the third Thursday at noon. Pete will be talking about his part, and then the following Wednesday at 8:30, which will be the fourth Wednesday at 8:30, I'll be talking about my parts. It's not critical. You don't have to attend absolutely every single session. Of course, if you can, that's wonderful. But if you need to miss a session, that's okay. As we are recording them, you'll be able to go back and view the recordings. But we will make sure that the critical information is contained in every session. So in October, Pete's going to get into mindfulness. There's been a lot of talk lately about mindfulness. I'm sure people have heard, and being self-aware. And so what does that mean in terms of the brain, and how do you pay attention to what is going on in your brain so that you can pay attention? I'm going to take those concepts and talk about, well, what does that mean about, at work? How can you be more self-aware of what's going on inside your brain, what you're feeling, what you're thinking, and how do you manage your actions, your behaviors, because they impact other people, right? So your reactions to something are going to impact how someone else feels. And so we're going to talk about how to manage yourself at work appropriately. In November, Pete's going to go into brain energy and decision making. Sitting and listening to us talking uses energy. Reading uses energy. Thinking uses energy, which is why you can be so tired after a day sitting at your desk, because your brain is working hard. So Pete's going to talk about that and the energy drain or the energy crisis that can happen because of that, and really how it impacts your memory. And it says how your memory starts to degrade if you try to hold too many things in your mind at once. I will take those concepts, talk about prioritizing and decision making at work. So when you've got so much going on, there are too many things in your brain. What do you do about that? How can you make decisions and simplify things so that you can take the appropriate actions? In December, this is December, it won't be the 3rd and 4th, it's the second and third, Thursday and Wednesday, because of the holidays. So we've moved it up just, for a scheduling perspective. Pete's going to dive into multitasking and distractions. You can't actually do more than one thing at a time. You actually switch between tasks. That takes a huge amount of energy and burns up a lot of attention, and it takes a long time to re-engage. So how do we think about the impact that task switching, multitasking, distractions, how does that impact your ability to do your work? And there's research to show that it can actually lower your IQ when you do that. And we don't want that to happen. So Pete will be talking about how we can clear our minds so we can do important tasks. And I'll take that then to some practical time management at work. How do you actually complete tasks, and give you some strategies and tactics there. January, Pete will talk about attention when the brain gets stuck. He's going to dig into how stress or arousal can both help and hurt performance. A little bit of stress can be good to get, a little bit of adrenaline can really get you focused. Too much, and the brain doesn't work very well anymore. So talking about strategies for when your brain gets stuck. And then I will take that specifically into problem solving at work and ways to, some problem solving strategies and ways to help you take that and apply it. February, drama and uncertainty. We've all had a lot of drama and uncertainty in our lives recently, we know. And the brain is wired to seek out reward, maximize reward, and minimize or avoid threat and dangers. Uncertainty is a threat. It is a danger. So Pete's going to explore certainty as a primary reward, uncertainty as a primary threat, and what does that mean for how the brain works. And then I will take that to how do we respond and react to threats and rewards at work? How do we manage emotions? Our emotions and other people's emotions can get us to respond in ways we may or may not want. And so how do we deal with that and work with others in the room? In March, Pete will talk about expectations and the mind. So expectations can play tricks on you. If your expectations are too high, you can be disappointed. If your expectations are really low, then you can be very happy when you get a certain result. but how does that play into how your brain works? And again, he talks about as we get you thinking, you will be depleting energy, but how do you get that to help you pay attention and be more mindful so that you can ultimately get your brain working in top form? And then I will apply that to thinking about what motivates you. And it ties in with what you expect to get out of work. What motivates you at work? What motivates you in your life? How do you get more of what motivates you in your work? In April, enemies and friends, and so collaboration. We are social beings and we need to interact with others. Quite often, collaboration works really well. Sometimes collaboration doesn't work well. Sometimes we go into our silos, right? We work with our department and we don't talk to others. So Pete's going to talk about from a brain perspective, how do we create more social connections, and how do we look at people? Sometimes we can decide very quickly if someone is a friend or a foe. How do we understand how our brain is working so that we can apply that? And then I will apply that to thinking about team building and teamwork at work. So how can we build stronger teams and stronger connections and collaborate more? In May, fairness and status. So the human brain likes fair play. But for some people, fair play is more important than it is for other people. And so Pete's going to help us understand how we manage our fairness response, what that impact has on our brain, and really, understand things like when you say to ask someone, why did you do that? You are implying they did something wrong. There are different ways that you can understand why people are doing things that don't make them feel like you are attacking them, that make it more of a fair situation. And he's going to share a model called the SCARF model. And it says here, you know how us Brits love fair play. Everyone knows Pete is British. So he's going to be talking about fairness and the importance of status and what that does from a brain level. And then I'm going to take that and talk about integrity and humility at work. So people want fair play, people want status, but as you interact with others, you can do that in appropriate ways. And so how can you do that with integrity and with humility? June, which will be the wrap up to the session, Pete's going to talk about constant change and really linking that to feedback. And feedback can be both a blessing and a curse depending on how you look at feedback and how you react to feedback. So he's going to talk about how that affects the brain and how change is hard and ways to rewire the brain. And then I will apply that to change management from an individual perspective at work. So not large organizational change management, but when you decide you are going to embrace some feedback and you want to work towards building a specific skill, how do you manage that change within yourself? So those are all of the sessions. Pete's going to dig into the brain. We do want to say that this is a certificate program, and if you attend 14 of the 19 sessions, Kelly will be sending you a certificate of completion so that you can frame it and put it on your wall if you want, or file it somewhere. But it'll be acknowledgement that you've been through this whole session. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Pete. And Pete, when you need me to page down, just tell me to switch the slides.
Well, it's yes, very sporting of you today, Jayne, to agree to be my vanner. And I thought, just to help you along, because I'm here in Nice and you're there in Toronto, when it comes to time to change the slide, we should have a special word or a password that will prompt you to do so. So I thought, for the benefit of today's audience, today's password will be woof. When you hear me bark, that means change the slide. And by the way, can I just say, Kelly, that was so impressive, that section. I'd like to sign up for this program as well.
Excellent.
Now, I promise you all, hand on heart, although you can't see me, that this is the last time I'm going to show you pictures of a brain. But it is actually worth knowing just at a very top level, because you see on the diagram there, the frontal lobe, the temporal lobe, the occipital lobe, the parietal lobe. And then right at the bottom, you've got the cerebellum and then actually the brainstem itself. In our ancestors, the guys that walked the Serengeti 250,000 years ago, they really didn't have the lobe development that you see in all those pretty colors that we have today. And ultimately, the development of the lobes over the last 250,000 years has made the difference between humans and a dog, for example, or any other animal. You know, that's why we are, in effect, choose my words carefully, a leading species. I'm not going to say the leading species, but a leading species, because actually we have developed our brains through evolution and other things, and other animals haven't done. Woof! There you go. So just very briefly, the cerebral cortex is the outer layer, which has a left and a right side. And I'm not going to go into the right and the left side today. But what it's important to know is what the actual lobes do. And we'll come on to that in a little bit detail in the next slide. The cerebellum has been with us forever, ever since there were human beings, and the brainstem has been with us forever. So the brainstem is the thing that liaises, if you like, with the spinal cord and all the nerves in your fingers and feet, etc., etc. The cerebellum is really, in some aspects, the subconscious as opposed to the conscious. If you think about, if you're actually aware of what you're thinking, that's all going on in the frontal lobes. The cerebellum is where your subconscious lies, where your memories could lie, and where you drag up things that have happened in the past that actually make you the way that you are today. Woof! Very good, thank you. So here's just another look at it. The frontal lobe is all about concentration, planning, problem solving, and speech. So when we get onto mindfulness, it's that frontal lobe that either allows you to be mindful or mindless. And we can have quite a good discussion about that. Also, you can get your sense of smell from there as well. The parietal lobe is all about touch, pressure, and taste and body awareness. The temporal lobe is all about the hearing. And the occipital lobe, I always have trouble saying that, I don't know why, is all about vision. It's actually quite interesting because everybody says, well, you see with your eyes, don't you? Well, actually, you don't. Your eyes are just the mechanism that translates signals to the occipital lobe that actually allows you to then picture what the images that you are seeing really are. So there you go. It's not your eyes at all. It's another thing called the occipital lobe. I got it right. Woof. So now for a little bit of fun. Woof. What happens in the brain when this lady picks up the pencil? And before I go any further, I do have to say, right now, looking at that picture or that photo, every single one of you who are still on the call have made an instant judgment. You made an instant judgment because you're either saying to yourself, oh, this is a business lady and she just happens to have dropped her pencil. Or you might be saying to yourself, she's not really dressed like business people are supposed to dress. This can't be a business lady at all. This is scandalous. Or you might have looked straight at the fella sitting behind her and saying, what's he looking at? It doesn't really matter because there's no right or wrong answers. What matters is that everybody, I guarantee it, on this call made a snap judgment. And that's what your brain does all the time. And you can't really stop it from doing it. You can actually take pauses and gather yourself and try and understand what's going on in your head. But how many people can genuinely do that? And how much practice does it take before you do? So anyway, woof. So the first thing that happens is this lady, and I'm going to call her a business lady because that's what went through my mind, because she's obviously working with the gentleman in the background. The first thing that happens is the lady has a thought. Oh, I dropped my pencil. And what this will do in the brain is generate what are called action potentials. Action potentials are two things. If you've got teenage kids, you know, action potential is basically you wish they'd do something because you think they can, but they never do. But that's got nothing to do with today. An action potential today is actually a flow of ions. What's a flow of ions, Pete, I hear you ask? Because it's all a long time since we did science in high school. Well, an action potential is a flow of ions. Ions are atoms having an electrical charge. An electrical charge is how the brain talks to the rest of the body, how the body naturally communicates with itself. So the action potentials actually fire up the nerve impulses. So when people say, oh, how's your brain wired? Or I wish my brain was wired differently. It's all because of those naughty little ions having those electrical charges. And, you know, there are some people who say you can rewire the brain, and we'll go into that later in one of the sessions in early part of 2023. Or other people say, you know, you're born the way you are and that's the way it is, but we will see. So a thought occurs to the lady, action potentials happen, ions bouncing backwards and forwards, creating these nerve impulses, which is the trigger effect of all this electrical information going across billions and billions of nerve cells. Woof. There we go. So now we've got the eyes. Actually, the first thing I should say is that slide 1 and slide 2 could have happened the other way around. She could have seen the pencil and thought, oh, I've dropped it. But on my first slide, it was like, oh, I dropped the pencil. But now the eyes are looking, and they're seeing, and again, a second series of action potentials are generated, nerve impulses. Now signals are being sent to the brain saying, oh, there's a pencil on the floor. Woof. So now we're actually going through the vision part. The eyesight part was just the action potentials and the nerve impulses. Now it's actually registering in the occipital lobe. So now we're experiencing vision through the eyes in slide 2. And now we're registering it as an image, or the lady is registering it as an image. Woof. So now the temporal lobe kicks in, and there'll be a third series of action potentials or nerve impulses again. And this time it's the temporal lobe, because it says, oh, wait a minute, I've seen one of them before. That's a pencil. And you build these things over time, obviously, but the temporal lobe is what says to you, I've seen one of these before. I know what it is. It's a pencil. Woof. And so now the frontal lobe kicks in, because that's where we have our higher mental activities. And so now the frontal lobe says to the lady effectively, hey, you need to pay attention to this. If you're going to reach it, then another series of action potentials or nerve impulses will have to kick in. Woof. And so now we're using the frontal lobe and the parietal lobe together to make sure that the motor and sensory functions in the arm, the hand, the fingers are ready to move. Woof. And now the parietal lobe kicks in again, because it's now sensing the pencil in the hand as she reaches for it, but only in the sense of the shape and the texture. There isn't a firm grip at this stage. It's just that basic instance where the lady touches the pencil for the first time. Woof. So now the cerebellum kicks in, because the cerebellum is the thing that's been with us since time immemorial. And that's the piece that says, oh, okay, now I've got to hold this thing. I've touched it, I'm going to hold it. So it runs concurrently with step 7, but it's all about coordination. The cerebellum is coordination. Woof. And now we get another series of action potentials, lots and lots of electromagnetic activity. The pencil is grasped and picked up, but it's no conscious effort. Everything that's just happened is instantaneous. Woof. Thank you. And why did I take all of that time to explain all of those things in terms of that lady picking up the pencil? Well, thank you for asking. It's because this ability to do all of those things completely naturally transcends race, gender, culture, age to a very large extent, social standing, economic status, and religious beliefs. So it doesn't matter what age you are, what sex you are, what ethnicity you have. It doesn't matter. We are all capable of doing those things with our brains. Woof. So here's a few fun facts that will blow your mind. Your short-term memory can only store 7 pieces of info for 30 seconds. No wonder I can't remember what I did last week. And I'm sure as you get older, probably that gets even worse. But things like this are really important to know, because when people say, oh yeah, you know, I'm really good at multitasking. No, not really, because the brain's not wired that way. It's important to recognize what you can and can't do so that you don't try and do too much. Our average attention span is only 20 minutes, which means I'm doomed already. because we're more than 20 minutes into this call. The average human attention span is actually shorter than that of a goldfish. Yes, it's true. I know, I've seen my teenage son. Lots of other facts that we'll include in the slides that we send out at the end of this session. But the one that really counts, I think, is on the right-hand side. And I'm thinking about you, Ryan, with all your brewing that you do. When intoxicated, the brain cannot form memories. No wonder people who get drunk can't remember what they did the night before. The brain is just not wired to do that. But there are things here that would apply in the workplace. Not getting intoxicated, that's not one of them. Well, not necessarily. But things will be going on in your brain and therefore in your mind that are affecting you minute, second to second at work. Woof. Thank you. So how do we distinguish between the brain and the mind in a really easy manner? Well, I like to think of the brain as being the hardware, the control center, the CEO, if you like, of the body and the mind. But the mind is the software, the thoughts, the feelings, the ideas, the emotions, the beliefs, and the values. Now, if you think about it, that slide alone hopefully conveys why what we're doing in this program is so important to everybody. It doesn't matter whether you're an accountant, a lawyer, an engineer, whether you're a human resources person, doesn't matter what your functional direction is in life. If you're interested in understanding teams, if you're interested in understanding individuals, every aspect of business is built on relationships and how we react to others and how they react to us. So all of this actually relates back to last year's peer groups when we talked about design thinking, the employee experience, the relationship at work, emotional intelligence, and then take that a step further, trying to understand why in the workplace some people spend their lives playing the victim. Oh, my boss is awful to me. Oh, it's not my fault. I'll assign that blame to somebody else. Or somebody's a bully, or somebody pushes other people around as a defense mechanism, or somebody sulks, or somebody doesn't take accountability or responsibility. All of those things are only symptoms. There are other causes that are causing those individuals to react in that way. But when have we ever, and I'm not saying I've ever done this, as humans, when do we ever take a step back and think, I should really try and understand this individual because they're behaving in a way that I'm either not comfortable with or that what's not expected due to my definition of professionalism, whatever that may be. So the point that you have to understand really is we can learn a lot about the brain and the mind, but you can't completely understand everybody immediately because you don't know their story. And if somebody behaves differently one day from the next, which most people do, you don't know what happened to them in that last 24-hour period. So what does the human brain do? It makes judgments, and that's what we're all really good at. When we were talking about design thinking, the first stage of design thinking, we talked about empathy, and empathy was listening to understand without judgment. And very few people can do the last two words, without judgment. So it's a really, really interesting way of trying to understand, why do people do what they do at work? Why do they say what they do at work? And how should I react to that? Do I need to be more understanding? Do I need to be more empathetic? Do I need to understand whether this is an urgent and important situation, or an important, not urgent situation, or an urgent, not important situation? I mean, this is why Jayne and I find this topic so very, very, very interesting. Woof. So that's what we're trying to achieve with this program, Your Mind at Work. So what's going on under the hood is me, and then Jayne taking that and actually applying it to the workplace to help you understand yourself, firstly, and your colleagues as well, very importantly. Does anybody have any questions?
Either everyone's left or fallen asleep, or there are no questions.
They went outside their 20-minute attention span there.
I know. It's like, what questions?
It was all very, very clearly presented. But I guess a simple question is, are you going to release the schedule or the slides after the meeting so we know?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
I mean, I think actually, Kelly, if I can suggest, not only do we send out these slides as we normally would do after a peer group, but on the web page, if you could have the timetable as the first page before people register, just to remind people what's coming up, that might be useful too.
Well, there is on the, and it's a little harder to set up that way, but if you go under the Your Mind at Work peer group, under the tabs there, every single one of them is laid out under there. So you don't have to keep going back to the calendar. If you can do that, and then what we'll do is post the schedules, and I will each month when I do the calendar invites, put them that way as well on there. But we could, if you gave me that slide, actually, Pete, I could put something up. I could put a little image on that actual page and see everything laid out.
Yeah, Jane's got the actual master copy of the presentation. So
yeah, I've got that, so I can just, I'll pull out the slide that has the list and get the dates and yeah, if you can upload that image, then it'll be easy for people to make sure they can block off as many as they can block off.
One last woof for you, Jayne.
Yep.
One more. Woof.
So.
There you go. That's just to remind people what the next sessions are.